Welcome to Worth Your Time with your hosts from the nationally syndicated Bob and Tom Show, Kristi Lee, and the president and CEO of the Indianapolis Zoo, Dr. Rob Shumaker. Our mission to inform, entertain, and educate with guests from all aspects of life. We guarantee there isn't another podcast that features two hosts with such different backgrounds and discussions with remarkable people doing exceptional things. So let's get started. Here are your hosts, Kristi Lee and Dr. Rob Shumaker.
Kristi.
Dr. Rob.
Good to see you as always.
Yes, welcome to Worth Your Time.
I am harking back to a conversation that you and I had more than a year ago, way more than a year ago, when we talked about starting this podcast.
And what conversation was that?
We'll see if you remember it.
I won't. I'm old.
I'm guessing. Right. That's what I'm going to remind you about.
Okay.
So we were very specific when we said, well, what do you want to do? What kind of podcast do you have? And both of us, like almost simultaneously said, we don't want to talk about religion or politics.
Yes, we did.
And today we're going to talk about the Pope. So we're
going to talk about religion just today.
Kind of.
Because the Pope is a big story.
Yeah, the way I'm thinking about this, we are recording this, very close to when the recent papal conclave happened and the new Pope was selected and installed. And for me, what I think is important about it, this is an international event, a news event, a cultural event, general interest. So just to be clear, we're not talking about religion today. We're not trying to get into anybody's business in terms of their religion.
I don't know about that.
Kristi's going to talk about religion. But I am not planning to talk about religion.
But it is top of mind.
Oh my gosh,
Everybody's
yes.
talking about it.
It's huge. It's all over the news constantly and coming right on the heels of the movie Conclave.
Correct.
Which was a great movie, great book.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that the number of views of that movie was something like 1 point whatever million, and it's now gone up to over 7 million.
Yeah, it was very popular during the current
huge
conclave.
So I want to talk about that a little bit. So to do that, and by the way, just to be transparent, I'm Catholic.
I'm Catholic.
So
which I didn't know that you were Catholic until just 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, because, of course, we talked about it on
but
other
of course
podcasts, but you
forgot.
about it.
Why do I keep forgetting these things?
I'm
old.
Well, there it goes.
There, I know.
And our PR manager, Braden, who's here today, also Catholic.
Yes.
So
a lot of Catholics.
We're full of Catholics.
Spangle, you Catholic?
That's Baptist Catholic.
Baptist
okay,
Catholic.
there we go. So we got a room full of Catholics.
And our
Presbyterian now.
Our guest, we can edit that out. And our guest is so 4 Catholics, including our guest.
Yeah.
Our guest,
but we're not leaning Catholic. We're just we're talking Catholic just because the Pope is Catholic.
So, and here's the deal:
if the Pope were Buddhist, we'd talk about Buddhism.
And I'll be fair about it. I think you do not need to be Catholic to listen to this podcast today.
Oh God,
this is for anybody. This is
no pun
awesome.
intended.
That's awesome. So, no, this is for everybody. We're not talking about it from a religious perspective. It's because it's interesting.
We're gonna have fun with this.
Our guest today. Again, in full transparency, wonderful guy, somebody I've known for many, many years, great and close friend, Mr. Tyler Mayer, who is currently the president of Providence Cristo High School.
That sounds Catholic.
It is Catholic. Phenomenal organization. That's a whole nother conversation. But he is also has a great history in studying theology, studying Catholic history, and at least for a few years, was in the seminary studying to be a priest, and has been a teacher, taught Catholicism, theology, church history, and he's the perfect person to talk about the recent papal conclave. Tyler Mayer, we
Welcome.
are glad you are here.
Thank you. And I know this is like more of an audio medium, but you do have some video, I think, that plays in some social media channels. So for those that get to see on video, just to paint a picture, yes, I was in the seminary a little bit. And if you were to see me in person with my black rimmed glasses and receding hairline, I have a very priestly-like look. So I think it's also, very monkish.
Very
monkish. I
would
agree. So it's,
and let's clarify now. Let's be really clear. Some people inaccurately have referred to you as bald. You are not.
Oh, yeah. Let's clarify that.
Yeah.
I am not bald. And I want to be very clear about that because I think bald people throughout our country and the world for that matter, or people that are suffering from this great affliction are cast incorrectly, because I'm not bald.
Right. What are you?
I'm going through the process of becoming bald, so I'm balding. So that's an important distinction. I still have hair.
Where?
On the sides.
I'm sorry.
Maybe on my shoulders, but we're talking about just on my head, on the sides.
Okay.
And if you look carefully enough, there is just a couple still hanging on the top.
All right.
They're hanging in there. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, thank you.
Why don't you just shave them off?
There's still hope.
Oh,
Chrissy.
okay.
They just came up with a wonderful drug for diabetes. I think we're next.
Okay.
I think we're next.
Yeah.
And I think I want to make sure that I hang in there and I am an inspiration to others when that comes through.
And you have those follicles left.
Correct.
Yeah. That they can use like the DNA and regrow. Okay.
Sure.
That's good for you.
Sure.
This is exactly how I imagine the conversation going.
Yeah, of course.
That's perfect.
I also want to say, too, I'm actually a big fan of this podcast. I am a big fan. It's one of I listen to about 5 or 6, and this is probably the top 3.
Oh, thank you.
Look, I'm going to verify. This is true, Chrissy. He calls me after every podcast that he does.
Yeah,
he's listened to all of them.
I'm a big fan. So it's kind of a weird thing to be on a podcast that you listen to.
Even listen to this podcast.
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. So brings down the pressure a little bit.
There you go.
But
see?
it's clear that you guys are like just crushing it with downloads, and I understand, like, from a couple episodes ago, it's like worldwide, like people are downloading like all over the place.
It's him because he has all these scientist friends that live in Madagascar.
I'm an expert in grade 8, so I get it.
Here's the thing, because I do check
World
our
Traveler
numbers and all this stuff. So right now, since we started, we have had downloads in 52 countries. Now, it doesn't parse as specifically as I'd like for the purposes of this podcast. Mm-hmm. So in the top 15 countries, Italy is in there.
Really?
Mm-hmm. What it doesn't say is whether that includes the Vatican. So my goal from this conversation today is that we get a download from the Vatican.
Do you have friends there?
Well, I don't want to call out anyone because I don't want to unnecessarily kind of sway them to down. I want them to come to this podcast on their own.
Okay.
However, in the Vatican, there's only about 700, 800 people that live there. So if you do get a download from the Vatican, it's a strong possibility that is His Holiness, the Pope himself, downloading this.
Probably an English speaker.
It probably. And we know that the new Pope does like to play Wordle.
Yep.
And the connection between Wordle and downloading podcasts has to be strong.
Okay, there it is.
You think?
Has to be. It has to be.
Correlation.
I do have one concern about this podcast.
What is that?
One concern. I'm kind of worried.
Why?
I mean, you guys are really building an empire here. Look at all the countries that you're downloading. An empire. And empires have a history of their big rise and their big fall.
Yeah.
And having me on today is a strong sign that you're starting to fall. Because there's just, I don't think that I'm going to bring the same value that a lot of your other guests have. You had some wonderful, wonderful guests on here.
You're a wonderful guest as well. Don't sell yourself short.
I try my best.
Okay.
I try.
We haven't done anything really yet.
I know, and this is the best it's going to be. So, yeah.
So, here's a start.
Okay.
Why don't we clarify for the people who are kind of at an entry point here, understanding, can you explain what the Pope is? What's the Pope?
The Pope is ultimately the leader of the Catholic faith. So he is the ultimate authority he's in charge of upholding the teachings of the Catholic faith. And he is kind of like the moral leader of all Catholics worldwide.
I have a question about that.
Mm-hmm.
Does the Pope really have authority? Like, how we have leaders in other countries who they're more of a face of the country, and then they have a cabinet behind them or somebody else who does the laws. How much power does the Pope really have?
Pope actually has a lot of power. He has the power to change church teaching, doctrines, things like that. But the way he goes about that is very, I would say, democratic, right? In the sense that he uses committees and councils to kind of go through what those teachings need to be. But as far as church teaching, it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Over 2,000 years. Those church teachings haven't recently in modern era changed or been altered too much. Practices have changed and altered, but as far as like core church teachings, those haven't been altered for hundreds of years.
Well, he turned the Mass back to the way it used to be.
You mean in Latin?
Not Latin, but like just the last time that it changed.
Yeah.
With your spirit. I never say that. I always forget.
Right.
And with you, or with peace be with you.
It's nice being at church at Christmas and Easter when most people come back and you always hear somebody being like, and also with you. Yeah. It does make you feel good about yourself. Like, I know that that's not true.
But I have friends that still go to church every Sunday and still say it the old way.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stealing a line from John Mulaney,
I love John Mulaney, the comedian.
He talked about doing the same thing and saying, and also with you. And he goes, because that's what needed to change in the Catholic Church. That's pretty funny. That's pretty good. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. Good point. Okay, so I wondered because you don't want this man to just be the face of the religion. He seems to have garnered this wonderful following already. People love him.
Yeah.
I wish they would have called him Pope Bob, though. I think that would have been great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Father Bob, he was.
Father Bob.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great question, though, because you do have to, the Pope does have to select a name, right? This is Pope Leo XIV.
Right.
Yep.
So they have to select a name.
Yeah.
They can't, I don't know how that works.
Has anyone ever used their real name? Do you know?
In the beginning,
Peter.
So Peter, and then so everyone knows Peter's the first Pope. At least Catholics
Peter,
do,
right?
Right.
Do you know what the second Pope's name was? Not many people do. It's great. Linus.
Really?
Isn't that fantastic? I just think that's
Pope
fantastic.
Linus.
I love
So in the
that.
beginning, first century or two, maybe three, they were using their own names, and then it converts at some point in time, and I'm not sure I know why.
Okay.
But yeah, usually they're selected somewhat ahead of time. Like those cardinals go into that conclave from what has been shared. It's not official. That already kind of knowing if they get elected what their name.
Well, we saw
that
in the movie. You know.
Well, then, and that was true.
Remember when they're standing out there? What have you thought about your Pope name?
Yeah.
No. Well, yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, now you got to help because you got to explain what a cardinal is.
Oh, yes.
And I think it's so interesting because the majority of the cardinals in this conclave were selected by the former Pope, the Pope who passed away, Pope Francis.
Yep.
So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure thing. So, and the other thing to point out, too, before I talk about cardinal, is it was the most diverse conclave that they've ever had. Meaning most countries were represented.
Really?
Used to be, up until probably early 20th century, predominantly European, predominantly from Italy.
Italian.
And it's gotten much more broad. This is the most broad. A cardinal is a fancy bishop. So in the Catholic Church, you've got a deacon, you've got a priest, and then you've got a bishop. The authority of a cardinal is not technically higher than a bishop, but typically a cardinal is given more projects to take on. And usually they get brought into Rome and they handle things both in Rome and then in major dioceses throughout the world. So it's more of an honorary title than it is anything else, but they're just really in essence a fancier bishop.
Do all cardinals get to vote?
Not all cardinals get to vote. You have to be under the age of 80 to vote.
Okay, how did that happen?
Yeah.
What happened to the poor cardinal who had a birthday the week before the Pope died?
Yeah.
Sorry, you're out because you're 80. What?
Yeah.
How'd that get decided?
They try to be very kind, but like some people who have already been stated in this room, as you get older, you forget things.
Yeah, you do.
I'm not calling anyone out.
Oh,
I'm
please,
just saying.
I admit it.
I mean, they forget things.
It.
Yeah. It actually, there is a better reason than that, and now I cannot remember what it is. So it's just great for your podcast.
Hey,
That's
you're
not
an
bad.
improv
I'm glad
guy.
that I'm on
Make it
here.
up.
Yeah.
We'll follow up in the comments.
Yeah, great. Let's do that. But there is a real reason.
How many cardinals are there? Is there a finite number of cardinals?
There's not a finite number, but there ends up being about, in this last conclave, there's about 138, I believe, cardinals that were there. There's an additional X amount that weren't voting.
Okay.
You don't have to go vote. Like, that's not a requirement necessarily. So it is about 160.
So if you're a cardinal and you're 80 or under, under 80, you don't have to participate?
You don't technically have to participate, but if you don't, I think they would shun you. Right? If you didn't have a good reason, you would be shunned. But it's interesting to note, you know how like Americans get a little of a bad rap overseas? You ever see like the distance in the conclave? They say, oh, we got to wait like 10 to 15 days.
Yeah.
That's really because of an American cardinal who in 1922 is Cardinal O'Connell. So Pope dies. He's like, okay, because this is his second conclave he's going to be part of. And the last one, he barely made it in time. So Pope dies. He's got like 4 days to get to Rome. And this is 1922. So he gets on a flight from Boston to New York. He's got a boat waiting for him. He catches this boat from New York to France. When he gets to France, he gets on an even faster boat that gets him to Naples. Once he gets to Naples, he gets on the express train from Naples to Rome. He gets to Rome, the train station, and it's noted that he runs through the city of Rome to get to the Sistine Chapel just in time to realize they've already elected the next pope.
Wow.
So two things about that. One, they now extended that to 10 to 15 days, right, to give people time. So sometimes, the reason I'm saying that, sometimes people can't make it there because they're sick or have other reasons. The other good thing about that, it is clear that that event really laid the groundwork for the script for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which I think was really nice. That was good. Yeah. Great movie.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a great movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rest in peace, John Candy.
So yes, they don't have to vote. There might be some things that they have to attain to at home that doesn't allow to get them. It's not necessarily a requirement, but it's a requirement, if you will.
I was kind of surprised that the Wall Street Journal had so many details about this conclave. Mm-hmm. I thought that was not.
Wasn't that true? That was true.
I know. What did you read that article?
Yes, that was. I never thought about that. You're right.
I was under the impression, as a cradle Catholic, those things stayed private. That they didn't. That you don't talk about the conclave. What goes on in the conclave stays in the conclave, like a Vegas thing.
Mm-hmm. I think the things that could stay secret in the conclave are like who voted, why they voted, who voted for who, and why they voted. Other ancillary things about that aren't under that shroud of secrecy, if you will. So my favorite story that I learned was Tagle, who is the cardinal from the Philippines, who was one of the leading candidates.
He was a leading candidate.
My favorite, you might have heard this, I just heard this today, actually, that he actually snuck candy in to the conclave and then gave a piece of candy once Pope Rob or Pope Bob was elected Pope. He gave him a piece of candy, like, I think you're going to need this, which I just think is kind of funny. So those kind of things they're able to share. The whole process itself isn't necessarily secretive. Just more of the content of what happens.
Is there a lot of backstabbing you think that goes on, like that was in the movie, that kind of?
I think in current days, no, not as much as the movie made it seem. I think hundreds of years ago, I think it was much more accurate for what was taking place in the conclave, when there was a lot more worldly politics being kind of centered in Rome, when the Pope had a much more authoritarian or military power. I think that was much more realistic. I think one sign we have that is not as true anymore is that an American was elected Pope, right? And one of the reasons why an American typically isn't elected Pope is they're worried about the concentration of power. So that political nature of what we see, I think that's an indication that isn't necessarily what's happening in that conclave. Oh, they're still human beings and they're still men.
Yeah.
Do I think there's some of that going on? Absolutely. But to the level it was depicted in the movie, that doesn't seem to be accurate of what's happening today. Yeah.
So can you go over a couple of the things in the movie? I want to get back to some of the other bigger points you brought up. But for example, when the Pope dies, there are things depicted like the sealing off or locking away his apartment or his chambers. Can you talk about that tradition?
Yeah, that is accurate. Those are things that do take place, and takes place for practical reasons and then for religious reasons, right? So practically, it's to make sure, in some sense, the Pope is deceased, right? And then make sure that is true. Make sure they have time to just investigate everything to make sure it's all on the up. And
so
up.
It's sealed with the body in there.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, that'd be something if he busted through the door and
that'd be right.
Right. Just kidding.
It's a joke.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also part of it is that's the big driving force, is the practical pieces of it. The ceremony.
And when they seal it, is that also to prevent people from going in to tamper with?
Right. And then even kind of what the movie depicts, there are some, when the Pope dies, he has his official seal. Could it have happened in the past when someone takes his seal, makes some kind of declaration and says the Pope did that and they don't have? Right. Yes, I'm sure that's happened in the past. I can't recall anything at this point in time. We have this, but I'm sure it's happened. And that's one of the reasons they do. They do end up destroying his ring that has the official seal on it, things like that.
I was going to ask about that, why they did that, because that wasn't, I think, explained too well in the movie at all. And they're like, why did they get rid of his ring? Yeah. I don't get that.
Every Pope has its own official seal.
The fisherman's ring, right?
The fisherman's ring, and it has a different kind of seal on it each time.
Unique to each Pope.
Unique to each Pope.
And that's what they use to seal the
official documentation's correct.
Yeah. So I saw a detail about again, back to your point, this just infused the media, all the details, everything as a news story, culture story, that the ring used to be destroyed, like broken in half or whatever. But now it's not, and it's literally just scratched. So that ruins the seal. And apparently that's to preserve the artifact, to preserve the history.
They don't bury him with his ring?
That I'm not aware of. They used to. I'm not aware if they bury with him or not.
I don't know about they bury or not, but the idea was you don't destroy it now, you just mar it, so you can tell it's no longer valid.
Right, correct.
I thought that was an interesting change. And I saw a video of the jeweler, a young woman who actually they brought in to do that etching on the seal of the fisherman's ring, which I thought was really interesting. Obviously, a modern twist.
Yeah. That is interesting.
But a really interesting thing as we went along. Okay, so let's go back to the naming. How does the name get chosen?
It's different with each pope. I mean, they have their own ability. There's not an official process. So it's fun. It usually comes out much later as to why the Pope chose that name. And later might be days or weeks. It's the understanding right now that Pope Leo XIV chose his to follow after Pope Leo XIII, who put an encyclical out. So an encyclical is an official church teaching. And that's what the Pope has the authority to put out kind of into the world. And he brought Rerum Novarum, which is a very famous and very popular encyclical at the time, because it was at a time when the Industrial Revolution was going on. Who are we as a church in modern society? And Pope Leo has already talked about wanting to build off that tradition because of the concern of what's happening in our society today. And the one thing that he's called out most notably is AI. And what's happening with AI and what is that doing with the dignity of the human person? He wants the church to be very focused on that. He's going to be very focused on that.
That'll be an interesting thing to watch.
Yeah.
Because AI is everywhere. And it is scary. It's scary for me, especially in my business. But I had no idea that the Pope would get involved in something like that.
Right.
That's interesting. So if you were elected Pope, what name would you choose?
I think I would have to go with, it would be following a Pope that I believe it's only been named this one time.
Okay.
And it was in the 7th century, and his name was Pope Hilarius. I just think it's very funny. And I think it would be I'd be hilarious the second. I'm dead serious. Yeah.
Was he a funny guy?
How could you not be?
Right?
Your name is Hilarious. I think that is fantastic.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
What about you?
Oh. Well.
Father Rob.
I didn't really think, I haven't really, I guess for me, now that I'm on the spot, it probably would be Francis.
Okay, because of the animals.
The saint I most admire, Francis of Assisi.
Yeah.
That's probably for me.
I have a statue of St. Francis in my
Yeah. I mean, that would probably be kind of an obvious.
That is obvious.
For Catholics that understand, that's also my confirmation name.
I don't get a name.
What?
Yeah.
I don't
get
a name.
What would you choose?
What do you mean?
Because I'm a woman. I don't get to be a pope.
Oh, yeah. Let's move on to the next question.
Oh, yeah. I thought we were talking about politics and that.
So that is your confirmation name, Francis?
Yeah. For Francis of Assisi.
Sure.
That
was, you were early on that.
Well, yeah, it was early. But
the animal thing.
Yeah, my whole life. But here's the thing. This is true. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I just wanted Kristi, do you know it's true that in this room, 4 of us are qualified to become
that's
Pope?
What I was going to ask you, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what the only 2 qualifications are?
What?
You're baptized Catholic and you're a male.
That's it?
That
really?
is it. Those are only qualifications to become Pope. Now, it's interesting to note the last time somebody who was not a bishop or cardinal or priest elected Pope was in 1378, and it may or may not have helped cause the Western Schism, which is the church kind of split amongst itself. So it didn't go very well.
Doesn't sound like it.
So I don't know that they've done it since 1378, but it's possible.
What was that Pope's name? Do you?
I don't remember.
Oh.
I don't remember.
So I don't know. I'm not trying to stump you here. I'm genuinely interested. So in my lifetime, I have to count. I think there's been 6 or 7 popes in my lifetime. But how many popes total? I can't remember that tally.
I think this is 268 or 267, something around. I can't quite remember.
So like an unbroken line.
Yep.
From more than 2,000 years ago.
Unbroken-ish.
Yeah.
Unbroken-ish. So in 1378 was the Western Schism. There ends up being multiple popes, and that's one of the problems.
Ah.
Right? So
when did we come back together?
I think it's 3 years later, if I remember
so it
right.
wasn't
So it wasn't too long, right? But I could be wrong. I would say big head, small brain.
Nobody's going to fight us.
But was
on
that?
this.
I'm sure no one's going to stickler on details.
Was that the 3-year conclave?
No, that was in 1271 when there was the 3-year conclave. Yeah.
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 Boy, that had to smell good.
Oh, I bet they were just ripe. Just ripe. And probably really continued to love each other's company.
Oh, yeah.
I would imagine.
Oh, yeah.
One thing, interesting thing I learned, I never knew this until this year. You talk about like a long conclave and when things happen and they're either to brand or off brand, one of the things that I think is just happening, they're in the beautiful Sistine Chapel, right? They're in the Sistine Chapel. It's absolutely gorgeous. But the second day they voted, they could vote 4 times. They're in there all day.
Right.
Do you know what they do? They bring in porta-potties into the Sistine Chapel for the
is
cardinals.
This true?
I swear.
They do?
Yes. I did not know that till this year. They brought in because you've got these, not all, but a large amount of them, older men who are in the Sistine Chapel they could be voting for 6 hours. They're secluded in the room.
They gotta
go.
Yeah.
And they brought in porta-potties or chemical toilets.
They did not show that on the news.
They didn't.
And they didn't show that in Conclave.
No, that was not in Conclave.
I should write a strongly worded letter.
Come on, Ray Fiennes.
Well, what about the lunch break that they took?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Do you know about this?
No.
So hundreds of years, nowadays, there's nuns that prepare all the food, namely the lunches.
Yeah, we saw that in the movie.
Yeah. Okay. And the lunches are very basic for 2 reasons. One, because back to the 3-year conclave, right? Let's speed this up a little bit. 2, people were sneaking in messages through the food, chickens and things like that. So the menu this year was lamb skewers, boiled vegetables, and spaghetti.
Well, after we got back from lunch and we had a Pope, because I was standing in my kitchen when it happened, and I went, wow, lunch must have really been bad.
Like,
I wanted
we got to keep this thing moving.
Yeah, I got to get out of here.
I'm sorry, I'm stuck on a detail.
Yeah.
You said they were sneaking in messages in a chicken.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
In the body of the chicken.
You mean
the cavity
like
of
in
the
a
chicken.
dead chicken?
Yeah.
So you might not know much about animals, but what I want you to hear
Not
is...
familiar. Like what?
They have a cavity,
They taught the chicken.
Yeah. Like, all right, this is going to be an Italian chicken, so stick with me here.
What a wonderful conversation we are having. We're going to take a quick break and come back and resume.
Yeah, we'll do part 2.
Yes, absolutely. Can you stick around?
I have nothing else to do.
Hey, I did think while you were talking about video, we should remind everybody you can get us on any of your normal podcast platforms.
Right.
You can also listen to the entire podcast on YouTube. All of our podcasts are up on YouTube. And find us on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you, Braden and William. We appreciate that.
Yes, Braden, you're great.
Good job.
Yes.
All right.
Worth your time. We'll be back.
You've been listening to Worth Your Time with Dr. Rob Shumaker and Kristi Lee. If you like what you hear, please give a review wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. Word of mouth is the best compliment. Thanks to our producers, Chris Spangle of Leaders and Legends, LLC. You can reach him at leadersandlegends.net. Also, thanks to Sophie Ritz. I'm Christopher Geisen. Thanks for joining us.